All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this Monday. My name is Ross Yelsey. I'm an assistant director of admissions and marketing at Columbia Journalism School. And I'd like to thank you again for attending this session about our PhD in communications program. It's, the smallest program at the school in the sense of the size of the student body, but it is a program we get probably the most inquiries about in our office every year. So I'm really happy to have the opportunity to have faculty and a current student from the program help us demystify a bit of this program for people and better understand how to put together the application and determine whether this program is the right fit for your particular interests. I'd like to thank Andy Tucker, the H. Gordon Garbadian Professor of Journalism and the director of the PhD program, and Sherry Henderson, a current doctoral candidate at the school, for attending this session and talking to this group of prospective applicants. And I thought I'd start with a question for Andy about the program. There's a lot of different PhD in communications programs in the US and probably in other countries. What is the kind of unique aspect of Columbia's program, and what was kind of the impetus to create it in the first place?
Yeah, hi, and thanks. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming. We are a relatively new program. We got started around 25 years ago, and for two main reasons, I think. One of them is the Columbia Journalism School itself, the master's program, the professional master's programs are very well known and very highly regarded as a way to learn the techniques of journalism. It seemed that to have a doctoral program to interrogate and go deeper and to go in a different perspective, to think about journalism in different ways, was just natural because of the home of the journalism school. But we also wanted to do something different from other communications programs. Most of those offer you a list of courses, communications 401, communications 501, and they focus very specifically on a specific body of knowledge. But the field of communications is huge and squishy, and we try to define it as something like aspects of the technological and social and political and financial and historical aspects of the production and exchange of information in society. But that covers a vast array of things. And we thought that it was one of the best ways for students to be able to approach this huge field is for them to make connections, for them to cross disciplinary boundaries, for them not to be taking, communications 101, but to be looking at courses in political science or history or sociology or law or architecture even. Almost all of the graduate divisions of the university are open to our communications PhD students. They can map out a course of study that gives them the cross-disciplinary and boundary busting approach that other places don't. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. It also imposes some responsibility to be able to define how you want to approach this vast field. But being interdisciplinary, I think, is one of the ways one of the things that really makes us stand out.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. And Sherry, maybe you can tell us a bit about your journey to this program. What kind of inspired you to pursue an academic or a doctoral career path, and how did you determine that this program was right for what you wanted to study?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I had done a master's at Columbia in a very interdisciplinary program called narrative medicine, which is in the health humanities. So bringing together, the art and science of medicine, as you would, or bringing art to the science of medicine. And I was co-teaching in the program, and I found that I had some ideas of my own that I still wanted to explore, some gaps in the scholarship, if you will. And I needed a program that would accommodate that, which was not that easy to find. I mean, I thought about English programs, like English literary studies, all kinds of things. And communications turned out to be the place that felt like it could best accommodate this very new field. Even though Andy said this program is new, my master's program was even younger than that. So to me, that's where this intersectionality is where the most exciting scholarship is happening. So, and I think also very open, and this is the legacy of Todd Gitlin, who until very recently was he died last year, but he was our chair. The idea of bringing this work out into the public, the ideas that operate in the real world, not just in an ivory tower, was really important to me. So that made it a very good fit.
Great, thank you. And Andy, you talked a bit about the interdisciplinary nature of the program. Maybe we can talk a bit about how the program is structured, like what kind of year by year do students do in this program? When do they take courses with different faculty around the university, and when do they start to really dive into their own research?
Yeah, the structure of the program depends a little bit on whether you have done relevant graduate work before. And this is relevant graduate work in an area, in a subject that contributes to the research you plan to do at Columbia, and that was in an acceptable and accredited institution. If you've done that, you get 1 year, no more than 1 year of advanced standing. If you come fresh out of without any relevant graduate work, and that's fine. We consider people with graduate degrees and without on the same basis. But if you come without previous work, we ask you to do 3 years of coursework. During that time, there are 5 required courses that we ask you to take. 3 of them are in the communications program and taught by communications faculty. One of them is a dissertation research seminar. One of them is a pro seminar in the literature of communications. And one is a course I teach called Journalism and Society. The other 2, the student has a choice. One of them deals with comparative politics in some way. One of them deals with contemporary organizations in some way. And there's a lot of freedom to choose there. And all the other courses that a student takes over the 2 or 3 years are up to the student. You choose them. The student chooses them from many other divisions in the university. When you finish the coursework, that's when you go through a series of other tasks that lead to what's called the Master of Philosophy, the MPhil. We ask you to do a series of comprehensive exams. The detail is all on the web. You can see that if you're interested, to pass a language exam, to present your findings to an informal group of classmates. Then you go off and you write your dissertation. And some people do that pretty quickly. Some people take longer because either their research takes longer or they have other obligations in their lives, which often happens. But a student usually takes somewhere between 5 and 7 years to complete the degree. The fastest anyone has ever done it is 4 years. Somebody who came in with 1 year advanced standing and wrote really fast, but it usually is much more like 5 to 7 years.
Great. And Cherie, maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the highlights of your experience. Are there certain classes or projects that were real standouts in what you were trying to learn? And what's it like being in a very multidisciplinary program like this, getting to know, faculty and departments across the school?
Yeah, well, I probably had an advantage there having come out of a Columbia master's program. But as far as the classes I was able to take, again, I really appreciated the flexibility that this program allowed me that I don't think I would have found somewhere else. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Andy's Journalism Society class as a highlight because it's excellent. But I think what you're looking for is more of the surprises outside the program. And for me, I thought of 2 right away. One was sociology of expertise, which is taught by Gil Ayal, who in the sociology department, which is about this shift that our culture has undertaken from looking to institutions as the places of authority to personal experience. And so for me, thinking about this, I'm looking at storytelling by patients, where how those operate in the world. That was really informative. And the second one was a class from my master's program, an elective that I hadn't been able to take as a master's student, so I went back and took it. Now was called Literature of Art. And I'll just get as an example, we had one class where we had a model, a nude model come in, and we had to draw him. Which is not an experience I would have had. And it was so powerful because then we all shared our drawings. And one woman, this was a very muscular young man, and in her drawing, and these are people like me who are just not artists, we're just people, regular civilians. She had drawn his arms in a gigantic way. And what we learned from that is when she looked at him, that's what she saw. And so how we all look at the same thing and see it differently based on, what happens to catch our eye. It was just such a powerful example to me of, again, how we all see things differently and how important that is to take into account.
Great. What is it like to be a part of such a small program? I know it's about 4 students usually that enter every year into the PhD program, but being in kind of a smaller cohort like that, how has that been for you?
Yeah, and we had one student who left after the first semester because he decided it just wasn't the right fit for him. So good on him for recognizing that early. But um, I had an amazing cohort, and we all are doing very different things, and yet we were able to support each other. And I think that actually made it more collegial. There wasn't that competition because we all had different interests and were able to encourage each other. And I think the collegiality was across not just my cohort, but across all of them.
Mhm. Great. And Andy, so Sherry mentioned it's a very, everyone's doing their own different type of research who are in this program, even though it's a small cohort. Everyone's very, unique in what they're pursuing. Could you talk a little bit about some of the general dissertation kind of subjects that people have tackled in the previous years? Maybe not in great detail, but just kind of topics that have, been addressed by the
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we tend to get a variety of topics. Sometimes there is a strong interest in a particular area. The past few years, many people have been interested in misinformation and fake news, or social media, or political polarization. So we often have lots of work there. But we've had recent other dissertations. Um, Binge watching on television, an analysis of how binge watching works, celebrity and fan journalism, social media and the rise of the new right in Brazil, conservative media influencers, um, regulating data in the US and the EU, the dissemination of knowledge in antebellum America. So they all have something to do with the exchange of information in society, and some of them are similar and build on each other. But there's room for people who have an interesting idea that is difficult to do somewhere else, as Sherry said, and that deals in some way with the exchange of information in society.
And is there a way the multidisciplinariness kind of plays into that, as opposed to maybe doing one of these projects in a history department or a sociology department? What can they do maybe here that would be a little harder to do in a specific discipline?
Yeah, well, they can take courses in the law school, which, I mean, law schools are famously barricaded. They often are very closed to outsiders. But because we are known as an interdisciplinary program, and because some of our students who are really good and really talented come and say, "Can I get in your course?" and they say, "Well, sure." So it's often a way to spread out, to find out things you didn't know you didn't know. I'm really struck by Sherry's story about drawing, which is not something that you think of in a communications graduate program. You don't think that you're going to sit there with a pencil and draw a model. But that kind of opportunity often helps nudge students in directions. They come with an idea of the questions they want to ask, and the courses they take, because they have this wide freedom, nudge them in areas they might not have expected.
Mhm. Great. And Sherry, what's your dissertation development process been like?
Messy.
Almost done.
Almost done. No, I mean, I will say I am ending up with a project that is not too different than the one I proposed when I entered the program, which I don't think is necessarily a common occurrence. But that said, I had 2 ideas once I finished the coursework. And unfortunately, I pursued one for a semester before I realized it just wasn't gonna. I just didn't have the background. It would have taken way too much to go back and catch up on that idea. So I went with my second idea, and I'm thrilled with it. And I think it's almost done. But yeah, I guess just being willing to explore a bit, and hopefully that's what the coursework helps out with too.
Mhm. Great. Well, it's great to have a current student. Usually we've had in our previous webinars in other years, people who have graduated and are teaching in some great universities. And Andy, maybe you could shed a little bit more light on what some of our graduates have gone on to do, whether it's in academia or other areas of the field.
Yeah. We keep in touch with most of our graduates. I know where most of them are, and they are very, interested in and loyal to the program, and often offer advice to current students. So the connections there are really great. But we've had about half of them, or a little more than half of them, I think, have either tenured or tenure track jobs now in places like University of Wisconsin at Madison, the University of Minnesota, University of Massachusetts at Amherst, University of Oregon, Muhlenberg College, Vassar, Yale, Oxford. So there are a lot of academic people on academic tracks, but we're perfectly happy to, and we welcome people who are interested in programs that are not traditional or in career paths that are not traditional. So we also have people who do things like, several have started their own research companies. People who work in government or in NGOs, people work in finance, people work as private practice lawyers. So we are, unlike some academic programs, we are very open to and really encourage people who want to explore in other areas than traditional academia, although we have a great placement record for people who do want traditional academic careers.
Great. And Cherie, we've talked about how this program is usually about 5 to 7 years, maybe longer in some cases. So it's a big investment of time and, spending a lot of energy on your research and studies. What would you say to these people who are attending the session, who are thinking about a doctorate, about just advice for thinking about pursuing this kind of path?
Yeah, I mean, I think the conventional advice is have a passion for your topic, right? Because you're going to live with it for so long. And I'm lucky that, I mean, this is actually a topic that I co-taught a class on in my master's program. So I've been working with this idea for probably 10 years now. And that's where the idea bubbled up. And I realized, there is something here that I think I can contribute. So having a passion. And then the other thing I would say is, as you're looking for programs in particular, there's that old advice about don't take the topic. When you're looking at classes, don't take the topic, take the professor. Which is, I think, something that really works well in this program. And so as you're looking at programs, identify people who would be good matches for you, which is something that I was really lucky to have and was key, especially in this program, which is a bit looser and less formal. So you have to be more self-directed. So to have people available to you as mentors is really key.
Great. That's great advice. And for Andy, for people who are in the session and maybe watching this later, the big question, of course, if they're interested in applying is, what do you look for, you and your colleagues look for in an application to this program? It's not as simple as, the highest GPA or like the kind of cutoffs that some kind of grad programs have for these kind of metrics. It's much more kind of specific. So in general, what kind of things are persuasive in an application to this type of program that's very small and, unique?
Yes. Well, the most important thing is to remember when you're applying anywhere, really, but certainly a small program like ours, is that we want to evaluate you and see whether you're right for the program, but you also need to evaluate whether the program is right for you. And my strongest advice is, do not write an application that you think will get you into Columbia. Write an application that is honest about what your interests and passions and hopes are. And that helps us to decide whether we are a good match. And sometimes brilliant, wonderful, lively, articulate students are rejected and they think, oh my goodness, what did I do? And it's that we didn't feel that you were presenting something. We didn't feel we were the right place for you. We would not be able to support you in the work that you wanted, which wasn't fair to you. So what we look for are people who have a really good idea of how to do interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary work, how to cross boundaries. If you present something that could be easily done in a history department, that's great. History is wonderful. I've studied history, but apply to a history department and not to an interdisciplinary program, because we look for different students with different focuses and different interests. The most important part of the application is your statement of research interests. But what we're looking for there is a good idea of the questions that you want to ask. We don't expect a proposal. We don't want a proposal. We want your ideas to evolve when you come. We want you to have it sent to be open to the experience of intellectual engagement. So we want to know what interests you, why it interests you, what in your background made you interested in this topic, what kind of work you may have already done on this topic, maybe 2 topics if you haven't made up your mind yet, but the questions you want to ask. are the most important. But we also look for people who turn in writing samples that show that they can do good, serious analytical writing. We look for an excellence in your academic background. We don't require the GRE at this point. You are welcome to submit it if you have taken it and you feel it reflects your accomplishments. But there is no penalty for not submitting a GRE. We do require TOEFL tests or the IELTS test for people who have English, for whom English is not their first language. But there's more information about all of that on the website and how to apply. Mainly, we want to see that what the kind of questions that interest you are the kind of questions that can be explored fruitfully and interestingly in an interdisciplinary, unique program like ours.
Great. So now is the time. If I turned on the chat for people, if you want to write any questions that we can get to, put them in the chat and address them to Ross, to me, and I will try to answer or to take ones that we can ask the whole group here today. If they're very specific, we might encourage you to write to us at apply.journalism@columbia.edu if it's a very long, specific question, but things that we can help illuminate a little bit more, please put them in the chat. And I'll take a few questions we got in advance. For now. One is for people who might be journalists who are really thinking of making a pivot into academic research. What might you look for in those kind of candidates if they haven't done maybe academic work before, but have been working in journalism?
Well, I'll answer that, but then I'll also ask Sherry to talk about it because she had a long career as a very accomplished journalist herself. Many people apply to our program who have been journalists, who have worked as journalists. Many people apply who have graduated from the master's programs at Columbia. We're down in the basement. That's nothing about who we are. That's just where the room was for us. And people know what we're doing and know that we're there and become interested in the work that we do. We do not require any kind of journalism or experience or background, but we welcome those people who have done journalism as a way, it often opens up questions. It often gives you it puts you in a good place to ask interesting questions. Often people who come as journalists don't have the academic writing samples that we ask for. If you have something that was a long, intensively reported, deeply researched, deeply thought through, deeply analytical journalistic piece, that's fine. Send that. We do value good writing. Many doctoral programs are notorious for tolerating writing that is deeply academic and jargony. We really hope you don't do that. We really prefer writing that is elegant, that is graceful, and sometimes journalists can do that really well. So that would be a plus, even if you don't have what you might think of as an serious academic background.
Yeah, Sherry, did you have anything you want to add?
I mean, I just echo everything Andy said. I think that, again, I'm really passionate about public scholarship and putting these ideas out into the world. I think journalists are very oriented toward that. The clear writing is huge. I mentioned that sociology class, and as much as I loved it, it almost killed me because I'm going to nominate sociology as the worst writing of all disciplines. And it made me really appreciate communications and how important it is to be able to, if you can't communicate your idea, then it's dead in the water to me. So I would think journalism and the training, the skills that are required for it, the analytical thinking, the getting to the heart of the matter, discerning what is important and what's not, all those skills I think translate well, especially to this program that would be happy for you to say something in 10 words rather than 100.
And then I got a question in the chat here about whether doctoral students can take classes, say in our MS programs, which are more skills-based. Are they able to potentially take those as part of their coursework?
Rarely. It's a strange phenomenon that a program like us, based in a journalism school, does not usually allow students to take journalism courses. That's partly out of our hands. That's partly due to state law that has requirements about the kind of coursework that is acceptable for an academic degree as opposed to a professional degree. But we also, that's not our focus. Our focus is not on the practice of doing journalism. If you've got that in your background, as we just said, that's terrific. That's a plus. But what we do is different from that, and we want students to be able to take full advantage of the other resources that are out there. So occasionally there are master's professional courses that are open to students. Some of them have taken a book writing course, for instance, but that's not something to count on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then a question about the financial aid. For this particular program, you might be getting emails from our admissions office about a scholarship app, which is only for the master's applicants that you need to do separately. If you are applying to the doctoral program, you don't need to fill out a separate scholarship application. It would be something that if you are admitted to this program, there's a financial package that is part of what all doctoral students would receive coming in, which I believe is, I think the first 2 or 3 years of coursework, the tuition is exempted, so you don't pay the tuition, and there should be a stipend, I think, for the first 4 years, if that's correct, Andy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great, so that's pretty straightforward. So you don't need to apply for that particular aid package. If you're admitted, that is as part of what you would receive. And then a question about application in terms of whether academic writing samples can be from other classes that people may have taken at the graduate level or the undergraduate level before.
Sure. We want this to be writing that you're proud of, that you feel shows us what you can do. And I would say, yeah, choose something that you yourself feel represents your best self. And if that's from another course, it doesn't have to be published. It doesn't have to be out in the public in any way. So that it's pretty much up to you. Just don't send us a whole huge long thing, please. we probably won't read all of 100 pages. So be selective.
Right. And a question on whether this curriculum that we have in this very flexible program could involve looking into things like emerging media, like AI, social media, VR, virtual reality, things like that.
Students have done a lot of work like that. Because we don't offer a bunch of communications courses, we don't have a course, for instance, in changing technologies. Is AI going to kill the world? But there are other ways that you can go about learning that and studying that. You can bring those questions to almost any other course that you take. There are courses in, for instance, the School of International and Public Affairs that do deal with some of that. There are courses in sociology, bearing in mind Sherry's caution about sociology. There are courses in sociology that allow you to approach that. You have to be a little bit open-minded and creative to find places where you can pursue those interests, but it's certainly possible. We also have at the J School, we have a couple of research centers, the Brown Center for Media Innovation, the Tao Center, I forget what the Tao's.
Digital journalism, I think.
Yeah, where they carry out a lot of research in this kind of work. So they don't offer courses, but they do research, and there are opportunities for some of the PhD students to be part of those research projects. So that's another way to get at that.
Mm-hmm. Question kind of related to that is whether, I think if I get this question right, is whether people can do dissertations that are maybe in a format that's slightly unconventional, like not an academic, exactly like written format, but something that might integrate media or other types of technology into it.
I think we are bound by some rules that are imposed from out, like the rule about not taking journalism courses. I think that a dissertation needs to be depositable in a concrete form, but it can sometimes incorporate illustrations or video snips. But I don't think you could do a dissertation as a video project.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then I think you talked about this a bit before, Andy, but in terms of what an applicant is writing in their essays for their academic interests, like how specific are you looking for when it comes to like a dissertation area of research?
Mm-hmm.
How like precise a topic or precise kind of an area of study do you want to see maybe in an application?
It's hard to judge. As I said, we don't want to see a formal proposal. We expect that evolves. What we want is to get a sense of what interests you, the questions that interest you. So it would be perfectly okay to mention a couple. Sherry, you said you had 2 in mind when you were writing your essay. Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, so I was my whole dissertation project started with an advocacy video that I watched, and this is while I was teaching a class on narratives of death and dying, and I couldn't figure out how to apply the theory, the main theory there, to this particular video, but it really engaged me. And so that got me thinking, okay, why doesn't this theory work for this story that this patient is telling? And that's what got me started. So the project that never ended up going, that I wasted a semester on, or spent a semester exploring, and decided it's for someone else, was the mysticism that we ascribe to words of the dying. That idea that somehow you're gifted with this knowledge as you're dying, this wisdom, this sudden insight. It just turned out to be too much based in philosophy. I still think it's a great topic, just not for me. So I ended up doing a concrete study of stories that dying people tell and what we can learn from those. So I kind of flipped the question.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. A question about the kind of teaching experience doctoral students will get while they're here, if they want to, get that experience when they are going on the job market, of being able to say that they've taught or done that while they're at Columbia. What is that like for a student here?
We are a little more limited than a traditional academic program because we don't have an undergraduate population. And most people who are graduate students in the traditional arts and sciences division are asked to teach undergraduate history sections or undergraduate political science sections by their departments. We don't have those undergraduates. We do offer one undergraduate class every other year or so. I usually teach that, and I've had a TA for that. The standard opportunity is a little more administrative than pedagogical. Most of our graduate students at some point or another assist in the journalism master's programs, essentials classes in the law of journalism, the history of journalism, the ethics of journalism, or the business of journalism. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. And those depending on the subject and the faculty member, they can include some, they always include grading papers, reading papers. They may also include something like leading. I'm sorry, they often include, they can include teaching a brief, taking over a brief part of the lecture. There are also often opportunities in other departments. The political science department doesn't have enough of its own graduate students, and they often come to us, and we have placed some of our students there. So the opportunities are a little less straightforward and take a little bit more entrepreneurship sometimes than other programs, but there are opportunities there. And students do 3 years of service as either teaching or research assistants in return for their financial aid package. So there will be something that students will do.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And for applicants who are interested in potentially, taking advantage of this interdisciplinary nature of the program by identifying already some faculty in other maybe departments, whether it's like narrative medicine, where Cherie's been studying, or in sociology or political science or law, do you need to know when you're applying that those faculty will be able to work with you? Or is that something, you get here and you can figure that out?
You get here and you can figure that out. Yeah. Did you have anything in mind, Cherie, when you came, or?
Well, yeah, again, since I had spent a few years in a different program, I was very well steeped in that program, and I knew I'd end up relying on those folks. So yeah, I had an advantage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. And in terms of someone asking about the length of the program, I know it's, it's flexible in terms of when it will actually, end for each student in terms of the actual number of years, but people may be unfamiliar with like US doctoral programs. Why does it sometimes seem to take a bit longer than maybe people might encounter in Europe or other places where it's maybe 3 years to do a doctoral degree? What makes this, a longer program? And this is similar to most doctoral programs in the US in that regard, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. This is very typical of a U.S. program and not typical at all of many of the ways that European and other universities operate. I don't know a lot about it, but my understanding is that many overseas institutions don't require coursework, or not the same kind of years worth of coursework that a typical U.S. institution does. My understanding is it's often a much more individual relationship in which a student finds an advisor, finds a sponsor, finds a supervisor, and goes to that institution and works with that supervisor and is done. We don't have that. We don't require you to identify a supervisor or a mentor or an advisor while you're applying. We discourage you from doing that because, as we said, our goal, and a goal of many other U.S. institutions, is to give you the flexibility to explore. In other institutions, you often are expected to come with an idea of what you want to do and do that. We like to give much more of an opportunity for you to figure out what it is you want to do, but that takes longer. That's why we do the 2 or 3 years of coursework, to send you out into the university to find out what's going on, to find out what interests you, to find out what you respond to. But it does mean that you can change your mind, as Sherry did, and many other students have done. Students sometimes submit an application and they ask a question, and then they come here and they get interested in something else entirely, and they go off in a way different direction. And usually that's cool, but that's something that's difficult in some of the universities that are not US based.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Question actually for Cherie from someone just wanting a little bit more of the story of how you kind of undertook your application to this program. What research did you do into different doctoral programs? You know, obviously you were at Columbia already, so you knew the university, but when you were kind of just figuring out what the right fit would be for you, how did you do your research? And then how did you kind of go about thinking of putting together your essays in your application?
Yeah, well, as Andy mentioned, I did have a 17 years in journalism before this, and I was lucky enough to have one colleague who had left journalism and became a communications professor, taught in the New York area, and then left. So he was not attached to any program here. I was committed to staying in New York. I live in New York. That said, there were several programs to choose from. So my friend kind of walked me through what each, I told him what I was interested in doing, and he explained to me how each program was oriented. I think you could do that same kind of research by coming to forums like this and getting a sense of the orientations. I just kind of had a shortcut there. So sorry, was there more to your question than that? My applications, I think I just echo what Andy already said about, the thinking. I had a question in mind that I wanted to explore, so I sort of came through that. And Michael Shudson, who is another professor in the program, has an interest in sociology of stories, so that was attractive to me in particular. And indeed, he is chairing my defense, so that worked out well.
And a question for Andy, I think I know the answer, but for people who are interested in these programs, should they be reaching out to all these faculty members in advance of applying to have them vet their research ideas, or what would you advise in that regard?
That's a little bit difficult. We get many requests every year, and we try to be responsive, but it's just not possible. There are only 3 of us, and for us to vet lots and lots of applications in advance is really time consuming and challenging. We're happy to answer by email specific questions. We are delighted that you have chosen to come to this forum, because this is a really great way to get some answers to questions. But to send a long proposal and ask us to vet it, it doesn't really help, because the admissions committee makes those decisions. The admissions committee is the one that considers your application. So sending it to one of us and asking for feedback is not necessarily going to help with the final admissions committee.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And a question, kind of a inside the J School question for some people who might be applying to this program who've done a master's already at the school in journalism. They're wondering, could they work with an advisor who's not part of your core PhD committee, but a professor in another part of the school, maybe someone who teaches in the MS or the MA programs as an advisor for this?
Not a formal advisor. There is a requirement that, again, is imposed on us, that is not our choice, that people who advise PhD students must themselves have PhDs. So most of the people in the master's side of the program, because journalism traditionally does not require advanced degrees in order to pursue the career, most of the faculty members in the master's program don't have PhDs and are not eligible to formally advise you. But many of them are really interested in the kind of work that we're doing and are happy to informally work with you, respond to you. Sometimes the relationships develop when a student is a teaching assistant for some of those professors. So it's the PhD program is a little bit different than the rest of the school, but wherever possible, like any kind of social event, like any kind of lecture, like any kind of workshop or panel that is not a closed specific class, those are all open to people in the PhD program. So they do get a large taste of the life of the master's program at the school, even though there are certain limits on advising formally.
And here's a question I can answer quick, which is whether we have online classes in this program. The answer is no. So that's just that. But a question for people who are maybe coming potentially from overseas or other places, like how many years would they be expected to be in residence in New York if they're in this program, if their research maybe would take them elsewhere? How long would they be expected to be here in the city?
Well, they need to be here for at least the 2 or 3 years that coursework takes. And because a student, our standard financial aid package covers 4 years, but requires assistantship during that time, it usually works best if the student can be here for the first 4 years, so the student is available for teaching or research assistantship. It's very difficult. It's happened in certain circumstances, but it's very difficult to do a TA or RA-ship remotely. So 2 or 3 years minimum, and quite likely 4 years. But after that, you are free to go anywhere. We have many students who have come from overseas and go back home, or who have other obligations that require their presence elsewhere. And after the 4 years, we would suggest that you work with your advisor to have a close connection if you're going to be doing your dissertation from from somewhere remote. It can be kind of lonely. It can be, it takes a long time. It can be a little bit isolating. And it helps a lot to have a close relationship with your advisor, with other students in your cohort. I had a student who had to go back home and was worried about losing touch. So we had a deal that every other Thursday she would call me up and we'd talk about what she had done. And another one every Friday, she sent me what she had written that week, even if it was a paragraph. So that kind of connection can keep you going. But ideally, you want to be kind of close for the time that it takes to finish your dissertation.
Mm-hmm. And this is a question maybe Andy and Sherry could answer, but is it possible or feasible to be doing work on the side, like, other types of jobs while you're doing these, years of coursework that begin the program for these first 3-4 years? Should you have bandwidth for other things?
No, I mean, part of it is that if you are receiving the financial aid package, which includes a living stipend, you are not permitted to take outside work for more than 10 hours. If you're an international student, you're not permitted to take any work that's off campus for more than those 10 hours. So there are limits imposed on by the structure of the program. But also simply, Sherry, I don't know, what do you think about?
Zero. Well, I mean, for me personally,
yeah.
No, zero chance during the full-time coursework of doing anything else. It was all I could do.
Yeah. I mean, some people we understand have left jobs that have, ties on them. We're not going to absolutely forbid the 10 hours a week, but as Sherry can attest, it's really hard to do it that way. You can work in the summer all you want. You can work over the breaks all you want. That's fine. But during the school year, we really discourage it, and there are these official limits that you do need to adhere to.
Mm-hmm. And a question kind of with a negative question in terms of what is this program not for? Like, is it, I know things like sometimes people think this might be a program where you could learn to be like a strategic communicator or a marketing person or gain advanced skills in public relations or things like that. Are those things that would likely not fall into what this program will fit?
Yeah. We one of the things we are not is super duper advanced journalism. This is not a degree in any kind of practical journalism. We can't, as I said, we're not allowed by state policy to do that, and that's not what our interest is. And yeah, you're right, strategic communications, public relations, advertising, all of those are kind of ancillary aspects of communications, and many other traditional communications programs will allow you to pursue that, to make that your primary focus. We don't do any of that. We are much more we're much more focused on an academic rather than a practical approach. And it there are ways that you can acquaint yourself with those fields if that's important to the work you're doing, but it's not our focus, and we would not be a good place for you. We would not give you what you want.
Mhm.
But I just jump in there and just to clarify though, like one of my classmates did her dissertation on an aspect of journalism from a critical perspective, looking at advertising, the line between advertising and editorial, and how the creep that was happening at the New York Times. So if you want to take a critical look at journalism or some trend within journalism, that's on the table, right?
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm glad you clarified that, because it was not a dissertation. She didn't study how to advertise. Yeah, she studied how advertising works and and how it's changing under the pressure of the digital world. So yeah, thanks.
Great. Maybe one more question. I think Sherry hit upon this already, talking a bit about, wanting to be passionate about your research as a way to succeed in the program. I thought, Andy, do you have any last thoughts about what, if you are in this program, what's a good mindset or a way to really succeed in a multi-year program like this?
Well, I'll also ask Sherry to weigh in on that one, but yeah, it is a big investment of energy and time and money. It's you have to really want it. And there will be times during the program when you maybe have doubts. Everybody stops, everybody wonders, everybody thinks this is maybe not the right thing. When I was doing my PhD, I almost quit to join the Peace Corps or open a bakery. I couldn't decide, so I stayed in the program. So yeah, it's an intellectual challenge, and it takes a lot of your passion and commitment. But I also have to say, I found my graduate work just delightful, except for when I wanted to open the bakery. I found it intellectually, ravishing. And I can't think of anything I would rather have done. But I did come out the other side sort of like a limp rag, and I lay on the ground for a long time. Sherry, do you have any addition?
No, I can't add. That's yes to everything you said.
Well, that's a great note to close on. I'm really glad that we had such a great turnout today for this conversation. Thank you for all the questions we received. And of course, if you have more, I put in the chat our apply.journalism@columbia.edu address, as well as our Meet With Us page, where you can come to a drop-in session with an admissions officer like myself, or to a Friday session to ask some more specific questions if you have those about the admissions process. Just so you know, the deadline for the doctoral applications this year is December 15th. So you still have over 2 months to put together an application. So plenty of time to think through this and, ask us questions in the admissions office, and just to prepare hopefully an application for this program as you, research other opportunities in the, communications field for advanced studies. So thank you again to Professor Andy Tucker and to Sherry Henderson for this great chat.
And thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, good luck.
Bye, everyone.